Welcome to 1939 AA. This is a group that was formed to study the precise program of recovery as given to us by the founders and pioneers of Alcoholics Anonymous. We will examine in detail the singular process for recovery from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body as codified and presented in the AA textbook, Alcoholics Anonymous. Apart from an accredited dictionary, no other authentication will be used in these sessions. With that, I would like to start by stating what were our purposes here, as it was just read, that we're going to be studying the precise, clear-cut directions that the founders had given us to recover from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, illness called alcoholism. And doing this, we're going to be using the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous for all of these sessions. It will be extremely helpful, beneficial, and recommended to have a copy of that book with you as we go through this. So this is our first session, and what we'd like you to do with your book is if you open up your book, just turn in a couple of pages. It'll be the third page that has writing on it. From the cover, just third page that has writing on it. In large, bold print at the top of the page, it says Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, underneath that, the authors give us a description, a definition of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. This is known as the title page. And they state that Alcoholics Anonymous is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Now, I don't know how much you got out of that from just reading it, but let me break this down for you as it has been done for me. See if we can't get a better understanding by using a dictionary, as I had mentioned, to understand these words better. So, by definition, is one unique. A story is based on factual accounts. Then it says of how. How is an action word. Many thousands of men and women have recovered. Recovered is not defined as cured, nor is it meant to be cured, as I had thought, and many other people I know have been misled by that word. Sometimes a hot topic in Alcoholics Anonymous, this word recovered. But when you look up the definition of recovered, it's stated to be defined as to be returned to a normal state of health after an illness. And they're saying from alcoholism, which the authors describe as a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So when we take all that and put it together, what Alcoholics Anonymous is, it's one singular factual account of the actions that were taken by lots and lots of people. It's not lots and lots of different actions. It's one set of actions that were exact same set of actions were taken by lots and lots of men and women. And as a result of taking those actions, every single one of them state that they have recovered. They have been returned to health after suffering from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is, both the book as well as our fellowship. That's what we do. We teach people how to recover. That's the purpose of the book. So let's move forward. We'll flip the page. And if you go to Roman numeral 5, this is where we get an outline of the table of contents of the book. Not going to spend a lot of time here, but on this page, if you look from the top, from the preface all the way down to the forward to fourth edition, it's about 24 pages. It's all basic information about Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're going to get into some of that today. After that, we have, with all of that basic information, if you also had the doctor's opinion in the first 3 numbered chapters, what we have is everything we need to know about step 1, primarily in the doctor's opinion in the first 3 numbered chapters. That's about 51 pages. I believe it's about 26% of this book. So if we know that this book is going to teach us how to recover, and we know that there's 11 numbered chapters in the book, the doctor's opinion used to be in the first edition. It was actually on page 1. It was a chapter. I still look at it as a chapter, and you're going to find out why over the next couple of sessions of how important this information is. So if we got 12 chapters in the first portion of this book, it would be easy to think that, well, we got 12 chapters, we got 12 steps, so they must lay this out 1 chapter per step. And that is not how this is laid out. Actually, we're going to find there's a lot more information on different steps, depending on what needs to be known, what needs to be learned. And here, 26% of the first portion, over 25% of this book of directions is all geared to step one. So for somebody to come into AA and say, "Oh, I'm working step one," or "Oh yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I'm done with step one. Let's move on." Uh, there's over 50 pages of information that we need to learn about step one to learn what they're saying an alcoholic is before we can determine whether we are one or not. So that's that portion of the book. Then we have what do we got? Chapter 4, We Agnostics. That entire chapter covers step two. Chapter 5 and 6, get this, in chapter 5 and 6, which is only 44 pages, 22% of the book, less than what we learned for step one. Just in those two chapters, we're going to be covering step 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. There are 9 steps covered in just those two chapters of 5 and 6. Then we get to the later part. We have chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 5 chapters making up 38% of the book. All of those chapters are geared towards step 12, specifically working with other people. We get clear-cut directions of exactly how to work with newcomers. 38% of this book tells us how important it is to work with others. And we're going to see that, from the very beginning of this book, we're going to see that over and over. So I just wanted to give you the layout of what we're going to be studying here over the course of these sessions. Now, after chapter 11, you see on that page, it's next thing it says is personal stories. Okay. That starts a different section of this book. We're going to be interested in what's in the first portion of the book, not what's in the second portion where personal stories start. And we'll see why that is here in a couple of minutes. So that's what we're going to be focusing on as the first portion. Moving forward, if we get a look at the preface, which is on page XI, it's just a few more pages in past the table of contents. XI, it's Roman number 11. And the preface, the purpose of a preface, the really definition of a preface is that it sets forth the book's purpose and scope. So even though the preface is only a couple of pages, we're going to learn everything about the purpose and the scope of the book. Primarily, we want to look at the second paragraph. And it says here in the second paragraph, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made to it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth editions. The section called the Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great benefactor. So again, we read that, not sure what all you got out of it. I know that the few times in the past that I had read through this, I didn't get much out of it until I had somebody, a mentor, sit down with me and explain to me what they're saying here. And if we take this one sentence at a time, one section at a time, the first thing they tell us is what kind of book we have. It says this book has become the basic text. So this is a textbook, which makes sense because we've already read on the title page that we're going to learn how these people had recovered. Well, if we're going to learn something, a textbook is generally a place that you're going to learn something. So a textbook, if you remember back in time that you may have been in school, there's 3 things we do with the textbook. We study it, we learn from it, and we take action based on what we learned. So what we are here to do is study this. So hopefully you can grasp the concepts that are in here, learn, that's part of grasping the concepts, learn what we need to do. And then the third part is going to be doing something with this information, taking action. So that's what we have as a textbook. And it says that this textbook is for our society, and it uses a capital S. So our society is not, this book is called Alcoholics Anonymous, but we also have a fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is our society. And what the authors are telling us right here is that this is the basic text for our society. This is what our society is supposed to be using to study. Now, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, as far as I know, the main thing that we do, the main action we do as a society is we hold AA meetings. So what are we doing in those meetings? That's the question. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I want you to understand that they're saying this is the textbook for our society. This is the textbook we're supposed to be using. We're supposed to be sitting down with this book and studying this book. That's what AA meetings are for. We're going to learn a little bit more about that later. Anyhow, it says the next thing they point out is there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made to the book. So they've had this is the first edition was printed in April of 1939. We're in the fourth edition right now, which was printed in 2001. So they have had 3 opportunities to make whatever changes they wanted to make to this book. And they said that there have been no radical changes. In fact, because there's strong sentiment against it within our society. We don't want it changed. Why do we not want it changed? Because it continues to work today, just as it did in 1939 when they started using this system that we have here, this program of recovery. They even explain that previous to what I just read. The reason there's strong sentiment against radical changes is because it continues to help such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery. Next piece, if you have your own book with you, I would highly recommend as we go through this using a highlighter and a pen, underline things that seem to be of importance, write down definitions as we're going through them, and certainly highlight as we go along things that you seem to think that are going to be. And I'll try to point out the things that I believe are paramount. And this is one of them right here. The next sentence says, the first portion of this volume. Remember, we were just talking about that in the table of contents. It's the first portion is where we're going to find a description of the AA recovery program. So the first portion of this book, as was mentioned, everything up to personal stories, it consists of 196 pages. That is 32 in the Roman and 164 in the Arabic numbers. The Roman numbers are very important as well. In fact, we're in the Romans right now, and we're learning a lot as we're going along. So it's 196 pages that we're going to be, that's where we're going to find the description of the AA recovery program. So if we use a dictionary and look up the word program, a program is defined as a series of actions designed to achieve a specific result. So what we're going to find in here is a series of actions. That would be the 12 steps. And they're designed to achieve one specific result, and that is to become recovered from alcoholism. That's what we're going to find. Where are we going to learn how to do that? In the first portion of this book. I have yet to find any other book printed that states we're going to show you how we recover. We're going to give you the clear-cut directions for the AA recovery program. This is the only book. And this can be confusing to people because, I have learned, I'm 51 years old now, and I had started going to AA when I was 14. I bounced in and out for about 10 years, just a little bit of background about myself. So I learned a lot about coming in early. I learned a lot about relapsing over and over and over. I learned a lot about what doesn't work, and I got a lot of bad information along the way. However, now I've been recovered for, almost 30 years. So that being said, what I want you to really pay attention to is that what we're learning to do is to recover from alcoholism. That's what we want to do. And what I had, been led to believe early on is that if you want to learn to do the 12 steps, that's why they wrote the book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. It says it right on there. It's the 12 steps. So that must be where you learn how to do it. Well, I can tell you a couple of things. Number one is you go into an AA meeting and you'll see in most of them, there's a poster that's hanging somewhere that has the 12 steps written on it. And if you look at it from a new perspective, I want you to look at it next time you see or you go to an AA meeting and see if you can read any directions on there and how to do any of it. There are no directions. The 12 steps as written on those posters come right out of this book, and it's basically just cliff notes about the steps. the directions are in this book to work them. And going back to the 12 and 12, as it's called, if you go back to the title page, the third page with writing, and you just back up one page, at the top of the page, it says other books. And underneath that heading, you're going to see a bunch of other books that Alcoholics Anonymous prints. They're in the printing business. That's how they make money. One way they make money, anyhow. So, anyhow, if you look up the word other in the dictionary, it's interesting. It's defined as not the same, distinctively different. Not the same and distinctively different. So, all of these books are not the same as this book. In fact, they're distinctively different. The first book that they list on here is the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And underneath that heading, the authors of that book tell us what that book is about, just like we got on our title page. And it said the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is an interpretive commentary on the AA program by a co-founder. Yes, it was primarily written by Bill Wilson, okay, who is AA number one, co-founder. But if you grasp hold of those two words, it's an interpretive commentary. It is not as what you'll find on page 29 of this book, where it says clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. They said it's an interpretive commentary, and if you use synonyms for interpretive commentary, it's the same as saying subjective opinion. Granted, it comes from Bill Wilson, but this is a commentary. You're not going to learn how to recover from a commentary or selective or subjective opinion. There's plenty of subjective opinion floating around AA meetings. That's not what we want to be going by. You know, we want clear-cut directions. After all, most of you have heard the reading that's done in most AA meetings, that they start out, will somebody read how it works? How it works. And the first thing it says in there is, rarely has a person failed who has thoroughly followed our path. If you pay attention to what they're saying there, they're saying it's going to be rare for you not to recover if you thoroughly follow their path. So we need to know what their path is so that we can, and we're going to need clear-cut directions so we can thoroughly follow it. That's what this is about here. That's what we're learning here. So the last thing I want to hit on is the last sentence in that second paragraph. It says a section called the doctor's opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939. Now, why would they go to great lengths to write that when they just got done telling us that there's been no radical changes being made to this book? Why are they calling out the doctor's opinion? We're going to see later how important the doctor's opinion is and how important it is that they kept that intact word for word. The information that's contained in there is what chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 are all based on, is the foundation of what Alcoholics Anonymous is and understanding the illness of alcoholism. So they're saying that it's exactly as it was originally written. So from there, we're going to want to jump forward one more page. If you just turn one page, you know, one thing I want to make a comment about is when they said that there's no radical changes being made in the second, third, and fourth edition, it's interesting to note on the next page, XII, if you go to the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, it tells us what changes have been made. And it says all changes made over the years in the big book have had the same purpose to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately. It's the only changes they made. So we're going to find as we get into this book, we're going to find the only changes that we see, and it'd be confusing if you didn't know this. And let me just jump forward to the very next page, and you'll see this right off the bat on forward to first edition, page XIII. The first paragraph we're going to read, it says, under the heading, it says, this is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. And it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, why did they say that? Well, first they say, we of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, at this point in 1939, when this book was published, there was no groups called Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. It didn't come until well after the book had been published. So when they're talking about we of Alcoholics Anonymous, they're talking we of this book. That's the authors of the book. This book has not been authored by one person. It was actually authored and went through the hands of more than 100 men and women. And what do they have in common? It says they have recovered, been returned to a normal state of health after suffering from, on the title page it says alcoholism, but they describe their alcoholism here as a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, in that sentence, I also want to point out, if they're saying there was only 100 men and women, then why on the title page in the beginning did they say this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered? That is where at some point they made a change in this book to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately. So those are the only types of changes that you're going to see. The next sentence, I would, if you do have a highlighter and ink pen, I would underline and highlight this. Tells us why we got this book here. It says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. That is the main purpose of this book. This is why they wrote this book, to show us not only how they recovered, but precisely, with precision, how they recovered. And notice they put all that in italics. Precisely how we have recovered is all in italics. Very important to understand. That is what the book is for. For them, meaning other alcoholics, we hope that these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. In other words, you're not going to need anything else to recover. All you're going to need is this book. We don't need anything else. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. So this is an account of their experiences. Remember in the beginning, title page, the story. Story is based on factual accounts. This is based on the account of their experiences. In other words, this is not opinion. This is the directions we're going to get. This is not conjecture. It's not somebody putting something together saying this is what we think will work for you. They're saying this is what we did and this is what we got. And if you're interested, we'll show you exactly what we did. And therefore, if you replicate it, it'd be rare for you to fail to recover. You know, and just so we understand, again, back to the how it works, where it says rarely has a person failed who has thoroughly followed our path. Well, I said rarely failed to recover, but how do we know that's what they're saying? How do we know they're not saying rarely has a person failed to stay sober? If they says rarely have they failed, but the next sentence says those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. So they're talking about those who have recovered, right? We need this information to recover. That's why they wrote it in this book. And thank God they did, because we have exactly this recipe that they had been able to put together that has worked for so many, and it's had very, very few changes whatsoever. None of the directions being changed. So anyhow, the next statement they make is they say that many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. So again, they're saying that the alcoholic is a very sick person. Alcoholism in this book is always described as an illness. You'll never see alcoholism described as a disease. It's all in this book. I don't care what the ADA or any of the medical community has to say. All we're doing is studying this book, and they always describe it as an illness. And actually, if you look at the top of page 18, sentence says an illness of this sort, and then they put a hyphen, and then they say, oh, and by the way, we've come to believe this an illness. They say it twice. It's throughout this book, but that's an interesting piece where they're actually saying it twice. So why are they calling it an illness? Well, what did they say they suffered from on the title page? They said that they suffered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That is what they saw their alcoholism as, a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Well, interestingly, by definition, an illness is a condition that prevents the normal functioning of the mind and or body. That's why they call it an illness. Last statement they make in the first paragraph on page XIII say, besides, we're sure our way of living has its advantages for all. Interesting. Up to this point, we have not read the word sober once. And here they're giving us a little bit of an idea of what this program of recovery is about. And they don't say it's about getting sober. They're saying it's about a new way of living, a new way of living. They also state that it has its advantages for all. So, on a new way of living, I guess if you're new, good way to look at that is if you think that when you look at the 12 steps, if you may have had the impression that, oh, all I got to do is go through 1 through 12 and I'm done and I graduate and I'm recovered and I'm good to go. That is not how this illness works. This illness will come back. So, what we have to do is continue this way. We're learning a way of living. So we're going to continue that way of living through these directions until, as if you're an alcoholic, until you decide you do not want to live anymore. That is what we're signing up for. This is not a 1 year deal or a 6 month deal. If you're an alcoholic and you want to follow the AA recovery program, it is a way of life that'll continue for as long as you live. And also note the last thing they stated, that it has its advantages for all. Now, for somebody who may be an addict or an alcoholic, that is very important to understand that while it may be advantageous way of living for other people, it is vital for us. Vital being defined as necessary for life. But it isn't advantageous to other people, and that is why, if this way of living is so advantageous to people who are not addicts, alcoholics, that's why our meetings are open to anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of living. Where we get that from is if you go to page 159, it's jumping ahead here a little bit to give us some reference points here. And you look at the last paragraph on 159, drop down 4 lines, and they tell us what an AA meeting looked like when there were only 10 or 11 of these guys, well before this book was written. And they say that scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter, and I would underline this, a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release, and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. That's an AA meeting. That's an AA meeting. You walk into a meeting, if you want to know if this is a real AA meeting, is it a little gathering of men and women? Check. Do they seem to be happy? That you want to know. And most importantly, does it look like they're constantly thinking how they would want to present their discovery to me as a newcomer? Or are they off in their own little cliques? Because that's what they were doing. And what is their discovery that they're looking to present? A discovery is defined as something you learn for the first time, and that is how they recovered. Hey, I felt just like you. I was living just like you, maybe even worse. And you know what? I don't feel that way anymore. I don't live like that anymore. And my life has been totally turned around. And if you're interested, I'll show you what I did. Is that what they're doing? Or are they all on their own? So that's what an AA meeting is. I'm going to go on to say, it says, in addition to these casual get togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by alcoholics. Oh, it doesn't say alcoholics. This meeting was attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. That is how AA meetings were. The idea of open meetings and closed meetings, I'm not sure exactly where that came from, and I don't really care. I just know that we're studying this book and we're studying what they did so that we can follow it precisely. And that's why this meeting is open to anyone and everyone. That's why we're putting this out for anyone who's interested in viewing it. So with that, there's another point here on this page I might want to hit on too, real quick. After that first paragraph, the first thing it says, it is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Understand, that's why they became anonymous, is because when this book was published and put out, and they knew they had this recipe, and back in the 30s, 40s, people read a lot more than they may be doing today. And they thought that they were going to get a lot of responses to their office. And these guys all had jobs, and there's not enough of them. So they didn't want people looking them up and seeing where they live and trying to get a hold of them. So that's why they became anonymous. We have turned this over the last 80 plus years into the idea that we only use our first name and we never use our last name. You know, at the level of press, radio, TV, and film, that may be so. But in AA meetings, and this is no direction. I'm not wanting to harp on this much, but I just want it to be understood because I did not know this. But if you go to a meeting that might have 100 plus people there, and after a meeting you're talking to a buddy of yours and say, oh yeah, well that's what Jim said. Oh, what Jim? Oh, short Jim, Irish Jim, Jim with the mustache. And we're trying to describe who Jim is because we know six, seven, eight of them. There's nothing wrong with using our last names if you so choose to. That is not like a requirement in an AA meeting. And actually, it doesn't talk anything about this in here other than the press, radio, TV, and film. So from there, I'm going to stop this session. This is going to be a short session because next week we're going to start with the second edition, start working forward in this book. But I just wanted to give some of this basic information and welcome everybody. And hopefully you find this information useful. And we do have a playlist that is being put together to record all of these sessions. We suspect it'll probably take roughly around 9 months to get through this, as we do one per week. And we hope you enjoy it. And thank you very much for joining us.